The rusted pickup rattled to a dying stop on the edge of Red Hollow, its engine coughing out one final protest before silence swallowed the highway. Dust rose in the fading light, curling around the figure of Ethan Cole, a man once hardened by war, but now hollowed by years of loss. His shoulders slumped inside a battered army jacket, his face lined not only by age, but by battles he could never leave behind. Beside him, two dogs broke the stillness. Rex, a stern German shepherd with eyes like sharpened steel, and Luna, a restless husky mix whose every movement hinted at wild resilience. They were his only companions, his only witnesses, as he stared at the crumbling gas station left to him by a father he barely knew. If you're just joining us, make sure to follow along. This story may remind you of how loyalty can appear in the darkest places. The station looked less like an inheritance and more like a curse. Windows filmed with grime pumps leaning like crooked gravestones, a faded sign hanging by one chain. Yet as Ethan stood in the dust, Rex stiffened ears, pricked his nose angled toward the cracked concrete. Luna let out a sharp whine, circling the same spot, her paws scratching with a nervous urgency. Ethan frowned, wondering what they had found beneath years of decay. He wanted only whiskey and silence, but the dogs refused to let him sink. Their sudden intensity whispered of secrets buried just beneath his weary boots. Something more than ruin lay waiting here, something that would demand he rise again. That worthless scrap would soon reveal a destiny hidden in rust and dust. The station stood before him like a monument to failure, its silence pressing on his chest, heavier than the Montana dusk. Ethan Cole let the wind bite his face as he leaned against the hood of his dead truck. Rex sat tall at his side, ears twitching to every sound, while Luna paced in restless circles, claws scratching the cracked pavement. To the dogs, it was a new territory to claim. To Ethan, it was nothing but a reminder of what he had lost, a stage for ghosts to gather. The truth was, the man who now stood there had already died long before that truck sputtered to its grave. Ethan had carried war home inside his veins. He could never scrub the blood from his hands, nor the screams from his ears. At night, when the world was quiet, memories returned like a pack of wolves. The blast in Kandahar that turned friends into fragments. The radio static that carried no answers. The way silence filled the spaces where voices once lived. War had carved his body into something lean and jagged, but the years afterward had done worse. His hair, once a rich brown, was streaked with premature gray. His skin, toughened by desert sun and mountain winters, bore lines too deep for a man his age. People mistook him for older, and maybe he was older in grief, older in guilt. His reflection in cracked mirrors never showed a soldier anymore, only a hollowed survivor. Back in the city, Ethan had lived in a one-room apartment that reeked of liquor and stale smoke. A mattress with springs jutting out, a chair that leaned to one side, and a broken lamp no one had bothered to fix that was home. In the parking lot below, his RV sat rusting its windows, fogged with mildew, a coffin on wheels where he sometimes slept when the walls of the apartment closed in too tight. Each piece of his life looked as if it had been abandoned by hope, and maybe it had. He drank not to remember, but to forget. 3 glasses of whiskey before sundown, more after. His hands trembled when he poured, and sometimes he welcomed the shake. It proved there was still something alive in him. The liquor dulled the sound of Ryan's laughter, the brother in arms, who had dreamed of proposing to a girl named Sarah, only to vanish in fire and dust. It blurred the image of his father, a man of granite who had demanded perfection but given no love. Ethan had sworn never to become that kind of man, and yet here he was, cold, alone, with nothing but silence for company. But silence never truly kept him safe. It was a predator in the room, breathing with him, waiting for the moment his mind drifted. That was when the past pounced. Sometimes he woke, choking, certain he smelled cordite and burning flesh. Other nights he dreamed he was back on patrol sand, filling his mouth as he tried to scream Ryan's name. He always woke before the end, but his sheets were soaked through, and his heart felt ready to burst. Now, standing in front of the decrepit gas station, he realized how little distance there was between his nightmares and this reality. The broken windows, the peeling paint, the leaning pumps, they looked too much like the ruins he had walked through overseas. The only difference was that this ruin bore his family's name. The inheritance felt like a cruel joke. Marcus had money, Clara had prestige, and he had rubble. His siblings had laughed when the lawyer read the will, and Ethan had swallowed the shame without a word. To them, he was already broken, a failure, clinging to scraps. His father had agreed, apparently. Oak Haven wasn't a gift. It was a sentence. A slow decay in the middle of nowhere. And yet, the dogs changed something. He hadn't asked for them, hadn't wanted them, but the moment Rex fixed those steady eyes on him, and Luna brushed against his leg with restless energy, Ethan felt the weight shift. It was small, barely a tremor, but it was real. They didn't pity him. They didn't expect him to be anything but what he was in that moment, their human. That silent recognition unsettled him more than any battlefield. Still, he tried to keep the pattern alive. In the small, dust-choked apartment above the store, he found a bottle of cheap whiskey left behind. The glass clinked in his hand as he poured the liquid amber in the dying light. He raised it, ready to drown himself again. But Rex's paw landed firm on his arm, steady as a command. Luna whined, circling, pushing her nose against his leg. The dogs blocked him, their presence, a wall between him and the bottle. It wasn't anger in Rex's eyes, it was command, a silent order. Not this time. Ethan's breath caught. For the first time in years, he set the bottle down. His throat ached from the need, but the craving was no longer king. The soldier inside him stirred, faint but alive. And then came the sound, the sharp scrape of claws on tile. He turned and saw Rex focused on the floor behind the counter, Luna digging at the base of the garage wall. Their bodies vibrated with purpose. Not play, not chance. They had found something. Ethan's pulse quickened. His dogs weren't simply restless. They were pointing him toward a secret buried beneath decades of dust and lies. He knelt, pressing his ear to the cool floor, hearing nothing but his own heartbeat. But the look in Rex's eyes told him the silence was about to shatter. His life of rust and ruin was already bending, cracking under the weight of what they had unearthed. He didn't know it yet, but the ghosts of his father, his brother, and his own broken soul were converging here. And with them came danger, a danger that would test not only his will to survive, but his willingness to fight again. For Ethan Cole, the war was far from over, and the battlefield was about to rise from beneath his feet. Ethan Cole had thought he had already fallen as far as a man could fall. But Red Hollow had other plans. It showed him there were deeper levels to ruin. The gas station squatted on the edge of the highway, like a corpse no one had buried. The pumps leaned crooked, their paint eaten away by decades of sun and neglect. A rusted sign dangled overhead, one chain broken so the whole thing twisted in the wind with a groan that sounded almost human. At night, the screech of metal against metal filled the silence like a dying breath. The dogs had settled uneasily into this wasteland. Rex took position like a sentry, watching the horizon with cold precision, as if he expected an enemy convoy to roll up any second. Luna refused stillness. She paced the yard, nose pressed to the gravel, whimpering when she caught scents that Ethan couldn't see but felt in his bones. Old oil, rust, stale, gasoline, maybe even blood, long dried into the cracks of the concrete. Inside the apartment, above the station, life was no better. Dust coated everything like a burial shroud. White sheets hung over furniture, their outlines, like ghosts, frozen mid-step. The kitchen reeked of mildew, and the refrigerator groaned when he opened it, offering nothing but mold. Even the air was heavy, stale, refusing to move. Each night, Ethan lay on a mattress that sagged like a grave, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the nightmares to drag him under. The sound of the wind against the broken windows sometimes mixed with the screams in his head, and he would bolt upright, chest-heaving, sweat soaking his shirt. This was what his father had left him. 4 walls full of shadows, a business with no customers, a ruin too worthless for scavengers to strip. Marcus had laughed when the will was read, and Clara had looked at him with pity, disguised as elegance. They had received wealth and respect. He had received decay. It was as if the old colonel had reached from the grave to remind Ethan one last time that he was the failure, the unwanted son, the broken soldier, better left to rot in the corner of nowhere. The timing could not have been worse. Ethan had just been fired from the only job that had tolerated his silences, repairing heavy equipment at a scrapyard. His boss had called it downsizing, but Ethan had seen the truth in the man's eyes. The outbursts, the drinking, the sudden flinches at loud sounds had made him a liability. That morning he had received a notice on his apartment door: 30 days to leave. No job, no home, nowhere to go but this station. The inheritance wasn't a gift, it was an exile. So this was it. The scene the opening had promised. The truck dead on the road, the station looming like a tomb, the man stripped of everything. His life had narrowed to a single point: survive here or disappear entirely. The days bled into one another. Ethan tried to make the place livable. He swept until the dust choked him, fixed what could not really be fixed, and patched holes with tape and stubbornness. Still, every corner whispered defeat. The lights flickered, the pipes moaned, and the smell of rot clung to him no matter how many showers he took. Food was scarce, usually cans decades old, their labels curling, their contents tasting of rust. Hunger clawed at his stomach, but pride kept him from driving into town to beg for work or supplies. And through it all, the memories pressed closer. When the sun dipped behind the mountains, he would sit at the counter with the whiskey bottle. The craving screamed inside him like artillery fire. Rex's paw, or Luna's pleading eyes, were the only things that held him back. More than once he slammed his fist on the counter and cursed the dogs for saving him. But without them he knew he would have drowned himself already. The real weight, though, was the silence. Not the ordinary quiet of a lonely place, but a suffocating, watchful hush that made his skin crawl. At night he sometimes swore he heard footsteps outside, gravel crunching under boots, though no one ever appeared. Other times, a low creak would echo from the garage, as if something heavy had shifted. Luna would growl, tail stiff, and Rex would rise with a snarl low in his throat. Ethan would grip the iron bar he kept by his bed and wait for the attack that never came. That unease twisted his gut in knots. Marcus and Clara had tried to buy him out, through slick lawyers offering sums that should have tempted him. But Ethan had refused, mostly out of spite. He wanted to deny them the satisfaction, yet the longer he stayed, the more convinced he became that they hadn't let go. Their eyes at the funeral had been too cold, too calculating, and their fortune, he suspected, hid darker truths than anyone guessed. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, every bark from Luna scraped at his nerves. He felt hunted even when alone. The dogs sensed it too, their bodies taut, their gazes fixed on shadows, as though they knew the ghosts weren't just in Ethan's mind. The spiral deepened one stormy evening. Rain hammered the tin roof and leaked through the ceiling in steady drops. Ethan sat in the gloom water, pooling at his feet, staring at the peeling wallpaper where mold blossomed like bruises. Lightning flashed, illuminating the shelves of the abandoned store, below rows of dusty boxes, yellowed newspapers, empty racks. For 1 second, he thought he saw a figure standing at the window watching. His heart thundered. The whiskey bottle slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Rex barked furiously. Luna's growl rolled like thunder. But when Ethan rushed downstairs, the window was empty, the ground outside washed clean by rain. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in the chair with the iron bar across his knees, the dogs at his feet, listening for the next sound. The storm passed, but the dread did not. This was his life now: no job, no family, no future. Just a ruined station, 2 dogs too loyal to leave him, and the constant shadow of threats he could not name. The weight of it all pressed him down, suffocating. If there had been a bottom, Ethan Cole had found it. And yet, in that hollow place, something was stirring, the sense that the ruin itself hid more than despair. Here in the station that was supposed to bury him, the first sparks of a secret were already burning. The rain had stopped, but the silence afterward was worse than the storm. Ethan sat slumped in the kitchen upstairs, a single lamp glowing weakly against the gloom. The shards of the whiskey bottle still glittered on the floor where he had dropped it earlier. His hands trembled with the phantom ache of thirst, his body crying out for the fire that would numb the memories clawing at his skull. The station smelled of damp plaster and mold, a stench that felt like his own failure made physical. Rex lay stretched across the doorway, massive head resting on his paws, eyes half shut but alert. Every so often his ears twitched toward some sound. Ethan couldn't hear. Luna, restless as ever, paced back and forth across the room, nails clicking against the warped floorboards, tail stiff with unease. To Ethan they were only shadows, with fur reminders that he wasn't entirely alone, but to the night they were guardians, holding back whatever darkness pressed at the edges of this ruin. The hunger for whiskey finally won. Ethan's gaze landed on the half-full bottle he had managed to salvage earlier, sitting accusingly on the counter. His mouth was dry, his chest tight. He stood each step slow and heavy until the glass was within reach. He twisted the cap, the scent rising sharp and familiar, promising blessed oblivion. Then a sound stopped him, a low, deliberate growl. Rex had risen to his feet, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Ethan. He didn't bare, his teeth didn't lunge, just planted himself firmly between Ethan and the counter. His gaze was steady, almost human, in its command. For a heartbeat, Ethan felt as though a fellow soldier was staring him down silently, daring him to cross the line. "Move!" Ethan rasped, voice hoarse. He tried to step around, but the German shepherd shifted, blocking him again. Luna joined, encircling behind Ethan, barking sharp and frantic as though urging him to wake up from a dream. Ethan's hand shook violently, the bottle sloshing. He felt anger flare, anger at himself, at his father, at these animals that refused to let him drown. "It's my choice," he muttered. "Not yours." He raised the bottle, ready to drink, when Rex struck. A heavy paw landed on Ethan's wrist, with precise force knocking the bottle sideways. Whiskey spilled across the counter and dripped to the floor, the smell filling the room. Ethan stared in disbelief, his arm pinned, his heart racing. The silence broke inside him like glass. He dropped into the chair, chest heaving as if he had just survived an ambush. Rex didn't move. He stayed planted in front of the counter, his body forming a wall between Ethan and the poison. Luna pressed against Ethan's leg, whining softly, nudging her nose under his hand, until his fingers curled into her fur. For the first time in months, the craving loosened its grip. It wasn't mercy, it was command. They had given him an order, live. That night, when the nightmares came, the dogs fought those battles too. Ethan jerked awake at 3 a.m., sweat drenching his shirt, heart hammering as he gasped for air. In his dream, the blast had taken Ryan again, torn him apart in fire and dust. Ethan had screamed his name until his throat ripped raw. But when his eyes snapped open, Rex was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, like a sentinel, eyes reflecting the faint light. Luna was curled against his side, her warmth anchoring him to the present. He buried his face in her fur breath, shuddering, the ghost of Ryan's laughter fading under the steady rhythm of her breathing. Morning brought no relief. Hunger gnawed at him sharper now, without alcohol to dull it. He trudged downstairs into the abandoned store, searching for anything edible among the faded cereal boxes and yellowed newspapers. Dust clung to his boots, the air thick and stale. He cursed under his breath, tossing aside useless cans with dates older than he was. That was when he noticed Rex wasn't beside him. Panic pricked his spine, until he saw the shepherd behind the counter, head low, nose pressed to the floor. His body vibrated with intensity. Luna, padded over ears, pricked, tail stiff, and began scratching furiously at a single cracked tile. Ethan frowned. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice echoed in the empty store. Rex ignored him, pawing harder claws, scraping against the linoleum with a sound that sent shivers up Ethan's arms. Luna barked once, sharp, commanding, then looked directly at him, as if demanding he pay attention. Reluctantly, Ethan knelt, brushing his hand over the tile. It shifted just slightly, a loose seam. His chest tightened. He fetched a pry bar from the garage, heart pounding, every instinct telling him this was no ordinary broken floor. With a grunt, he wedged the bar beneath the tile and heaved. The old adhesive cracked the tile, snapping free, with a sound that seemed to echo far too loud in the silent station. Beneath it was not dirt, not concrete, but a dark, hollow space. His pulse roared in his ears as he reached in and felt metal, cold, heavy. He pulled, and a green military footlocker scraped against the edges as it emerged from the floor, like something exhumed from a grave. He froze, breath shallow. Rex sat back on his haunches, gaze fixed on the chest. Luna pressed against his leg, whining in anticipation. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, hands trembling. This was no accident. The dogs had led him here. They had known. The padlock on the chest was old but strong. He fetched a hammer and chisel, each blow ringing through the empty station like gunfire. His arms ached, his palms stung, but he didn't stop until the lock snapped with a sharp metallic crack. The lid creaked open, and a stale smell of leather oil and old paper escaped like a trapped spirit. Inside lay neatly packed items, dog tags, medals, photographs, and at the bottom a brass key shaped like a gear, its surface tarnished but unmistakably deliberate. Next to it a heavy green-bound journal, filled with strange ciphers and numbers. Ethan's vision blurred for a second, not from alcohol, but from something sharper, the pulse of adrenaline, the flicker of a new mission. The dogs watched in silence. Rex's tail gave a single slow thump, as if to say, "There at Island." Luna tilted her head, eyes wide, waiting for him to act. Ethan stared at the journal, the key, the chest. For the first time in years, the weight in his chest shifted, not gone, but moving. His life had been rust and dust, silence and shame. But this was different. This was purpose clawing its way back from the grave. The station wasn't just a tomb. It was a doorway. And his dogs had been the keepers of that door all along. The chest sat on the kitchen table, like a relic stolen from time, its dented green sides catching the light of the single lamp above. Ethan Cole stood over it, his breath, shallow sweat, still trickling down his temples from the brutal work of breaking the lock. Rex sat nearby, ears pricked, posture stiff, as though guarding a sacred ritual. Luna paced back and forth at Ethan's side tail, twitching, her eyes flashing each time she glanced at the opened lid. He had expected junk, old uniforms, useless paperwork, maybe the brittle bones of his father's obsession with discipline. Instead, what stared back at him was something altogether different, a map of a life Ethan had never been allowed to know. On top lay a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Ethan peeled it back with trembling fingers. A pair of dog tags clinked softly in his hand, worn smooth at the edges. His father's name was etched into them with precise military neatness, Col. Grant, Col. Next to them, pinned carefully together, were service medals, some familiar, others Ethan had never seen before. One bore the gleaming silver star, dulled now with age. Ethan's throat tightened. He remembered how cold his father's eyes had been in life, how unforgiving, how unreachable. Yet here, preserved with almost reverent care, was proof that behind the stone face had been a soldier who had carried burdens Ethan could barely imagine. Beneath the medals lay a leather wallet. Ethan flipped it open, expecting receipts or ration cards. Instead, a faded photograph slid into his hand. He froze. It was a woman's face, soft-eyed and smiling, her hair pinned back in a style decades old. His mother. She had died when he was just a boy, so early that her face had blurred in his memory. But here she was again, young, alive, radiant. His fingers trembled as he traced the outline of her cheek, as if the paper could warm beneath his touch. His chest ached in a way he hadn't felt in years, a wound long buried, tearing open. Rex let out a low whine, as though sensing the storm in his master's heart. Ethan swallowed hard and set the photo aside before the ache drowned him. Then he saw it, a brass key resting at the bottom of the chest, unlike any key he had ever seen. Its head was crafted like a gear, intricate and deliberate, that its teeth gleaming faintly, despite the tarnish. Ethan picked it up, its weight solid and undeniable in his palm. It was no ordinary key. It was a promise, a question, a doorway. Next to it, bound in a green military journal, was the true treasure. Ethan lifted it carefully, as though it might crumble in his hands. The cover was heavy canvas, scarred by use. When he opened it, he found no simple diary, no clean record of days gone by. Instead, pages of dense ciphers and coded notes filled the book, each line written in his father's unmistakable, meticulous hand. The sight jolted something inside Ethan. His training returned in a rush, the endless hours spent in the Rangers, deciphering patterns, memorizing codes, learning to find meaning where none should exist. His father's journal wasn't a memoir. It was a record of operations, transactions, secrets, hidden in plain sight. The dogs hadn't uncovered just keepsakes. They had unearthed a battlefield disguised as paper and ink. Ethan flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing as patterns began to form. Numbers, repeated names hidden in substitutions, locations marked with cryptic symbols. He recognized the skeleton of a substitution cipher complex, and deliberate, designed for someone trained enough to break it. Was it meant for him? His heart pounded, each turn of the page louder in his ears. He thought of the nights he had drowned himself in whiskey, of the weeks wasted staring into the dark. And now here was a mission, one left behind by the very man who had condemned him to ruin. Luna pawed at the journal, her nails scraping the cover, drawing his attention to a page near the middle. Ethan flipped it open and froze. A date stared back at him in plain numbers, unencrypted. His mother's birthday. The one day his father had never forgotten. The one day the colonel's mask had cracked when Ethan was a child. For a moment the cold soldier and the lost father blurred into one, and Ethan felt the distance between them shorten across time. The air in the room seemed to thicken. The station's silence was no longer empty. It was charged, vibrating with secrets. Rex sat straighter. Luna pressed close to Ethan's knee, and Ethan understood in his bones this was no accident. His father had chosen him. Not Marcus, not Clara, him. The son everyone had dismissed, the soldier branded broken. A chill ran through him as he considered what that meant. His siblings would never stop circling if they suspected what this chest contained. And if the codes in this journal pointed to something greater, money operations, hidden power, then his inheritance wasn't just a ruin, it was a war. The lamp above flickered, once the shadows in the room deepening. Ethan's pulse quickened, every sense sharpening, as though an unseen enemy had stepped into range. For the first time in years he wasn't paralyzed. He was alert, alive. He looked at the journal, then at the brass key, then at the photo of his mother, smiling like a promise from the past. His life had been rust and dust, whiskey and silence. But now he held proof that the ruin wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Rex gave a low bark. Luna yipped, once sharp and eager. Their eyes glinted in the dim light, urging him on, reminding him that they had led him here for a reason. Ethan straightened his shoulders, the weight of despair shifting into something new. The inheritance wasn't rubble. It was destiny buried in shadow, waiting for him to claim it. The mystery that had haunted the station was no longer a whisper. It had stepped into the open, daring him to follow. And Ethan Cole, for the first time in years, was ready to fight. The journal and the brass key still lay on the table when Ethan heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. His body tensed. He had told no one he was here. The only living witnesses to his discovery were Rex and Luna, and both had risen instantly. Bodies, rigid, ears pricked toward the door. The headlights of a sleek black sedan sliced through the dusty windows of the station, a jarring contrast to the ruin. A moment later, a knock, sharp, deliberate, on the warped front door. Ethan's gut clenched. Only one kind of person showed up unannounced at a ruin like this family. Sure enough, when he opened the door, Marcus stood there in a tailored suit that looked more expensive than the entire building. Behind him, Clara leaned against the car, arms folded, silk scarf trailing in the night breeze. Their faces bore the same expression, pity sharpened into contempt. Ethan, Marcus said smoothly, forcing a smile. "We thought we'd check in. See how you're holding up." His eyes scanned the station with disdain. "Looks like exactly the kind of place Dad would saddle you with." Clara's voice was softer but more cutting. "You don't have to suffer here, Ethan. We could take this burden off your hands. There are buyers, investors. You'd walk away with money in your pocket." Instead of her gaze drifted to the peeling walls, the broken shelves, this tragedy. Ethan said nothing. Rex pressed against his leg, silent but alert. Luna stood behind him, hackles raised, a low growl vibrating in her chest. "I don't want to sell," Ethan finally said. His voice surprised him, firm, steady, unshaken. Marcus's smile thinned. "Don't be foolish. You've never managed anything in your life. You couldn't even keep a job at a scrapyard." His tone dropped, venom threading through it. "This place will swallow you whole." The words stung. They weren't lies. Ethan felt the familiar pull, that old whisper telling him he was useless, broken, doomed to fail. His hand twitched toward the bottle that wasn't there anymore because Rex and Luna had taken that weapon from him. He swallowed the ache and met his brother's gaze. "I'll manage." Marcus's smile turned into a sneer. "You're drunk right now, aren't you? You always are." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The court would agree if we showed them your record. It wouldn't be hard to have you declared unfit. You'd lose everything, station, land, even the dogs. Do you really want to test us?" For a moment Ethan faltered. Doubt pressed heavy on his chest. Maybe they're right. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe I am just the broken one. He glanced back at the table where the journal lay half hidden beneath a rag, the brass key gleaming faintly. That secret could shift everything. But if Marcus or Clara saw it, they'd rip it away, bury it, or use it for their own gain. Rex moved then, just a step, but deliberate, planting his massive frame between Ethan and Marcus. The shepherd's teeth flashed in the dim light. Luna barked sharply, a crack of thunder in the tense air. Marcus stopped cold, the smirk faltering. Clara straightened from the car, her eyes flashing with sudden unease. Ethan felt strength stir where doubt had lived. "You don't get to threaten me here," he said, voice low but steady. "This place is mine. Whatever's buried in it, whatever Dad left, it's mine." For a long moment, silence stretched. Then Marcus leaned back, masking his frustration with mock amusement. "So be it," he said. "But don't say we didn't try to help." He turned, his polished shoes crunching on gravel, and Clara followed, her scarf snapping like a warning in the wind. The sedan pulled away, leaving dust and tension hanging in the air. Inside, Ethan collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. His pulse hammered. He had stood his ground, but the doubt lingered like a bitter taste. Marcus wasn't bluffing. If they moved legally, if they dragged his past into the light, he could lose it all. What if they're right? What if I can't hold this together? He felt something nudge his knee. Rex's head, heavy and solid, pressed against him. Then Luna scrambled into his lap, her weight grounding him, her warm breath steady. Their bodies carried no judgment, no doubt, only trust. He lifted his head and looked at the journal again. Its ciphered pages glinted like a challenge. Hope had come to him in the form of codes and secrets, but hope was fragile. Already his family had tried to tear it from his hands. And a darker thought gnawed at him. If Marcus and Clara were willing to threaten him openly, what else might they do in the shadows? That night, sleep offered no escape. He dreamed of Ryan again, of the blast in Kandahar, of screams swallowed by fire. He woke with a shout, fists clenched, breath ragged. But this time Rex was there, steady as stone, and Luna curled against him like a living shield. They pulled him back from the edge. Ethan stared into the darkness, listening to the dogs breathing. His siblings thought him broken, thought they could corner him into surrender. Maybe they were right about his past. But the dogs had shown him a truth his family never could. He wasn't alone. Still, unease gnawed at him. Tonight had only been the opening shot. Marcus and Clara wouldn't stop. They would circle, waiting for weakness. And Ethan, for all his resolve, still carried a battlefield inside him. One slip, one drink, one moment of despair, and they would win. As the wind howled outside and the station creaked in the night, Ethan tightened his grip on the journal. The legacy wasn't just ink on paper, it was the only weapon he had. And if his family wanted war, they would find him ready. The station groaned in the wind that night, but Ethan no longer sat in defeat. He had pulled the journal close, spreading its pages across the scarred table, pencil in hand. The ciphers blurred and shifted under the lamplight, but his mind, once clouded by whiskey and shame, now cut through with a soldier's focus. Each line he broke felt like breathing again. Each symbol unlocked was a heartbeat reclaimed. When exhaustion threatened, he rose and worked the garage instead, hammering loose boards back into place, clearing the windows, forcing order into ruin. His hands bled against rusted nails, yet the pain steadied him. Rex watched silently from the doorway. Luna pacing at his side, their presence constant as the pounding of his own heart. Outside, dawn cracked open over the Montana horizon, spilling fire across the jagged peaks. Ethan stepped out into that light journal, clutched in one hand, the rough wood of the doorframe steady beneath the other. For the first time in years, his sigh carried not surrender, but resolve. The broken truck, the lifeless station, the dust, they were no longer endings, they were beginnings. And in the rising sun a seed of hope took root, fragile but unyielding.